Hi, thanks for stopping by my poster. My name is Heather Kosakowski. I'm a third-year grad student at MIT, working with Nancy Kanwisher and Rebecca Saxe. My poster today is characterizing cortical responses to faces and scenes in infant ventral temporal cortex. This work was done in collaboration with Michael Cohen, Lyneé Alves, and Atsushi Takahashi. We all know that adults have cortical areas that respond selectively to categories such as faces, bodies, objects, and scenes. But what we want to know is, when does selectivity emerge? Behaviorally, we know infants prefer to look at faces and spend more time looking at faces than other objects. However, recent neuroimaging studies have failed to find face-selective responses in primate infants. For example, in a group of 3 macaque infants, face-selective responses did not emerge until about 250 days. Similarly, in a group of 6 6-month-old infants, the response to faces when contrasted with objects was not reliably different than objects. However, in a contrast of faces and scenes, the same group of infants showed that face and scene responses land in approximately the same cortical areas in both infants and adults. So what we wanted to know with this study is, do infants have selective responses for any visual category, faces, bodies, or scenes? To answer this question, we used awake infant fMRI. For those of you that aren't familiar, the top left picture shows a picture of the specialized infant coil that we use. We first swaddle infants and then apply hearing protection and put them in this coil. This coil has a mirror that goes over the infant's eyes. Then a parent or a researcher will go into the coil with the baby, while a researcher stands outside the coil. The researcher standing outside the coil will monitor the attention of the infant, as well as stop the scan if the infant needs anything like a diaper change, or is quiet, crying and unhappy, or needs to eat. We also recently designed a new coil in collaboration with Boris Kell that enables us to use infant headphones that have better hearing protection and let us play music for the babies, such as lullabies. This new coil also enables us to use a better acquisition sequence due to the hearing protection, and has a flexible head design that goes over the infant's head and can accommodate a variety of head sizes and shapes. All right, so for this study, we recruited 86 infants that were between 2 and 11 months old. On the x-axis here, I'm plotting 70 of those infants. The remaining 16 didn't have any data that was collected. On the y-axis, you can see the number of volumes. The volumes are 3-second TRs. And in the gray, you can see the amount of data that was collected per subject. And in the blue, you can see the amount of data that was eligible for inclusion. To be included in the analysis, the volumes had to have less than 0.5 millimeters or 0.5 degrees of motion. We removed high motion volumes and created subruns. Subruns needed to have a minimum of 24 consecutive volumes. To be included in the group random effects analysis, subjects had to have at least 96 volumes. We had 49 subjects that met this criteria, 23 of whom we had collected from the new coil. To be included in the functional ROI analysis, subjects had to have at least 2 of these 96 volume subruns. That was so we could analyze the independent responses. And we had 30 subjects that met this inclusion criteria, 16 of whom we had collected with the new coil. All right, so what were the results? First I'll show you the stimuli. We showed babies videos of faces, objects, bodies, and scenes. We also had an abstract, colorful baseline to keep infants engaged during the baseline. The videos played continuously for as long as the infant was awake and happy and attending. The blocks were 18 seconds long, and each video itself was 2.7 to 3 seconds. All right, so now what were the results? All right, first we looked at the phase selective responses in the infant brain. The first place we looked at was the ventral parcel. The ventral parcel is approximately where the fusiform face area falls in adults. And so first I'll show you a representative subject. This is a 4-month-old baby. The data was collected with the nucleus. And you can see in the ventral temporal cortex, there are 2 little red blobs there for face activations. Just to note for that representative subject, this is not the best subject. It's just a representative subject. Some subjects had much more face activation there and some subjects had much less. But then if you do the group random effects analysis, you can see here across 23 infants that were collected with the nucleus, there's a nice little face blob there in the right ventral temporal cortex. It's interesting that we don't also see one on the left side. All right, so now for the functional ROI analysis. We had 30 infants that we included in this, and as you can see in independent data, the face response is significantly greater than the body, objects, and scene responses. Okay, so the next place we looked is in the superior temporal sulcus. Again, the same representative subject here. You can see bilateral face activations. In the group random effects analysis, you again see bilateral face activations in the superior temporal sulcus. And for the functional ROI analysis, the face response is significantly greater than bodies, objects, or scenes in the independent left-out data. Right. The next place we looked is the medial prefrontal cortex. Again, with the representative subject, you see a nice, lovely little blob there in this 4-month-old. In the group random effects analysis, there's also a little blob in the MPFC. It's not as well defined, but it's still there. And then if you look at the ROI analysis, you again see that the face response in independent left-out data is significantly bigger than the body, object, and scene response. All right, so finally, we also looked into subcortical ROI, which collapsed across all of the subcortical areas. In this representative subject here, you can kind of see a little face activation in that subcortical areas. It's more defined, the subcortical activations are easier to see in the group random effects analysis. Again, this was collected with the nucleus, 23 infants. But if you do that functional ROI analysis, you no longer see a face selective response. Here you see that the face response is significantly bigger than bodies and objects in independent left-out data, but there's no difference between the response to faces and scenes. All right, so just to summarize that, we found face selective responses in the ventral temporal cortex, the superior temporal sulcus, the medial prefrontal cortex, but we did not find a similar face selective response in the subcortical areas. We next looked for body responses selectivity. Adults have a body selective response in the lateral occipital cortex. And in the group random effects analysis, we see this nice blob of a body response in a very similar area. It's right lateralized. And if you do the ROI analysis, the difference between the body response is significantly bigger than the object and scene response in independent left-out data, but the difference between bodies and faces is only marginal. So you could say this is selective, but at the most stringent criteria, it just a strongly preferential body response. All right, so then we next looked at scenes. So if you contrast scenes with faces, you get these, in the group random effects analysis, you get these really nice big blobs in the ventral temporal cortex. You can also see a nice blob in the primary visual cortex. But if you do the ROI analysis in the ventral parcel, you see that the scene response is reliably more significant than the face and body response in independent left-out data, but it is no different than the object response. All right, so we found the first evidence ever of phase-selective responses in the infant brain, but we did not find purely selective responses for other categories such as bodies and scenes. So future directions, we want to try to see if we can uncover what the role of top-down connections in the development of category selectivity is, and what is the role of what is the representational space of infant cortex. I'd love to talk to you more about any of these things if you want to email me. Thanks so much for stopping by my poster. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.